What prison meals look like in the USA, Russia, Japan, and beyond. The Taste of Control. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. In every prison on Earth, the day begins with the same ritual, the clang of metal doors and the smell of food that's never really about nourishment. It's about control. From the sun-bleached yards of Louisiana to the frozen cells of Siberia, meals are how a system reminds its captives who holds the power. United States, calories over compassion. At 5:30 a.m., a tin tray slides through a slot in the door at the Federal Correctional Complex in Florence, Colorado. It's a small portion of powdered eggs, a single slice of white bread, and something called meat patty, a soy-based blend that, according to Bureau of Prisons procurement data, costs about $1.18 per serving. The taste is secondary. What matters is the number of calories, between 2,600 and 2,800 per day, the federal minimum for adult males. Prison menus in the U.S. are public records. The Federal Bureau of Prisons updates them quarterly, often rotating 3-week cycles. Oatmeal or grits in the morning, bologna sandwiches at lunch, and chicken or chili mac at dinner. Former inmates say the food is edible, barely. One ex-prisoner from Louisiana State Penitentiary told the Marshall Project, "You eat fast, not because it's good, but because the smell sticks to you if you don't." Across the country, budget cuts have turned meals into numbers on spreadsheet. In 2015, Arizona's private prisons reduced food costs to less than $1 per meal, according to the Arizona Republic. The result was predictable: moldy bread, green-tinged chicken, and outbreaks of foodborne illness. Lawsuits followed, but the contracts remained. The deeper story, experts argue, is that food in prison isn't just sustenance, it's part of the sentence. According to criminologist Heather Thompson, hunger is an invisible punishment. You can't see it on a docket, but it defines daily life. When inmates protest, through hunger strikes or meal refusals, the reaction is often swift. In 2013, 30,000 California prisoners participated in what became the largest hunger strike in U.S. history, demanding an end to indefinite solitary confinement and better food quality. The California Department of Corrections acknowledged the strike but downplayed conditions, calling the meals nutritionally balanced. Independent observers disagreed. Inmates at Pelican Bay described oatmeal that smelled of disinfectant and meat that arrived half frozen, half gray. Russia, bread and fear. Half a world away, in Russia's penal colonies, food is even more symbolic and far more scarce. A former inmate of Penal Colony No. 2 near Pokrov, the same facility where opposition figures have been held, told Novaya Gazeta that breakfast was watery kasha, sometimes with worms. Lunch? A thin cabbage soup and a spoon of buckwheat. Dinner? Bread and tea. Official guidelines from the Russian Federal Penitentiary Service list 2,500 calories per day, but investigative reports from Meduza and BBC Russia found real intake often closer to 1,500 or less. The difference is corruption. Food budgets siphoned by regional administrators, ingredients resold before reaching the kitchen. The kitchens themselves are a world of routine and fear. Inmates assigned to food duty described cleaning potatoes with broken glass when knives were forbidden. "Food is punishment," said one former cook, interviewed under anonymity. "If the guards don't like you, they can send you the burnt pot." Still, food is also resistance. In 2021, inmates across several Russian prisons reportedly coordinated short hunger protests, unconfirmed by authorities, to protest abuse. The state dismissed them as disciplinary incidents, but leaked letters told another story: men choosing starvation over silence. Japan, discipline in every bite. If the U.S. prisons measure calories and Russia rations survival, Japan designs its meals around order. The country's penal code emphasizes rehabilitation through structure, and food is part of that precision. According to Japan's Ministry of Justice, each inmate receives about 1,800 to 2,100 calories daily, tailored to weight and labor type. Menus are published monthly. Rice, 150 grams, miso soup, a protein like grilled fish or tofu, and vegetables, all portioned to the gram. At Fuchu Prison, one of Japan's largest facilities, meals are eaten in complete silence. Guards observe timing, posture, and waist. A former inmate told Asahi Shimbun, "You learn to chew 15 times, swallow, then set the chopsticks down. If you move too fast or talk, it's a rule violation." Unlike the chaos of many Western prisons, Japanese facilities treat the dining hall as an extension of training. Cleanliness is obsessive, plates are stacked precisely. Critics, however, say this order masks emotional starvation. According to criminologist David Johnson, meals in Japanese prisons are nutritionally adequate but spiritually barren. They reinforce obedience, not humanity. The contrast with Western systems is stark. While U.S. inmates barter ramen noodles as currency, a phenomenon documented by The Economist and the Marshall Project, Japanese prisoners cannot trade food at all. There is no black market in rice or soup. Every grain is state-controlled. Beyond the invisible hunger. Across continents, one fact repeats: food defines freedom. In Norway's Halden prison, often praised as the world's most humane, inmates cook their own meals. They buy groceries from a small shop inside the compound. A former guard told The Guardian, "When you control your diet, you control your dignity." In the Philippines' overcrowded Quezon City Jail, where cells meant for 800 hold over 3,000, prisoners survive on rice and sardines. NGOs have reported malnutrition and outbreaks of disease, calling the conditions a slow violence. Human rights observers say these contrasts reveal priorities: punishment or rehabilitation. In places like the U.S. and Russia, meals reinforce authority. In Japan, they teach conformity. In Norway, they rebuild autonomy. But everywhere, the taste of prison food lingers long after release. A man once released from Rikers Island told reporters, "You can buy steak the next day, but it still tastes like the chow hall. The smell never leaves." By the end of the day, whether the tray is made of steel or plastic, the spoon of wood or metal, each bite reminds a prisoner that freedom isn't just about walls, it's about choice. And in most prisons, choice is the first thing taken away. The currency of hunger. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. In every closed world, value is created by scarcity, and behind bars, nothing is scarcer than taste. Inside prisons from Texas to Tokyo, food becomes more than a necessity. It's a currency, a bribe, a peace offering, and sometimes a weapon. United States, the ramen economy. In 2016, a study by sociologist Michael Gibson Light shocked the public. Instant noodles had replaced cigarettes as the top prison currency across America. He called it the ramen economy. The cause wasn't addiction, it was deprivation. Inmates across the U.S. began trading ramen bricks not because they loved the taste, but because it was dependable, cheap, and filling. When the kitchen cut portions or when trays arrived cold, ramen became salvation. A single pack worth 59 cents on the outside could buy laundry services, a haircut, or protection inside. In facilities like San Quentin and Attica, commissaries sell ramen in bulk. The brand doesn't matter, what matters is access. Those without money on their accounts, often called indigents, depend on trades to survive. "Food is power," said one former inmate to Vice News. "If you can feed people, you control people." Guards know this dynamic. In disciplinary blocks, commissary privileges are the first thing to go. It's not just punishment, it's psychological leverage. According to Bureau of Prisons regulations, inmates in solitary confinement can be placed on a restricted meal called the Nutriloaf, a dense brick of blended vegetables, flour, and soy. Courts have debated its legality for years. In 2008, the Vermont Supreme Court ruled it not cruel and unusual, while Illinois banned it altogether after lawsuits claimed it was unsanitary and degrading. The loaf isn't meant to nourish. It's meant to remind. Russia, kitchen kings, and the gray market in Russia's penal colonies, food trading takes another form: hierarchy. Within the inmate caste system, the kitchen holds unusual power. Prison cooks, often older men trusted by guards, decide who gets the better ladle of soup or the thicker slice of bread. Former prisoners interviewed by Medusa describe a silent economy: extra sugar traded for cigarettes, soup meat swapped for favors. The cooks were kings, one recalled. They could make your week or starve you out. Those who worked in the food lines often used spoons to pass coded messages or smuggle contraband. Punishment for theft was swift: isolation, beatings, or, in older camps, transfer to harsher labor. In some colonies, prisoners even baked their own bread. But when yeast ran out, they used fermented potato skins. The smell of rot filled the barracks, yet men still lined up. Hunger had no dignity, only persistence. Unconfirmed accounts from human rights groups claim some inmates bribed staff for better rations, trading handmade crafts or family-sent parcels. The state denies these claims, but letters smuggled out from penal colonies near Irkutsk and Yaroslavl tell another story, of meals turning into bargaining chips for survival. Japan, order, shame, and the forbidden trade in Japanese prisons, food rarely becomes currency, not because inmates don't want it, but because they can't risk it. Every grain of rice is logged, every utensil counted. To share or hide food is an offense, punishable by loss of privileges or solitary confinement. Yet, according to a 2018 report by Japan's National Diet Library, there are whispered exceptions. Inmates on cleaning duty sometimes exchange leftovers of side dishes, not for gain, but for quiet gratitude. A guard interviewed by NHK said, "The system doesn't tolerate exchange, but humanity finds small ways. The black market exists not in food, but in favor. Someone folding your blanket, someone mending your clothes." But even these gestures are monitored. To an outsider, it might seem cold, but to Japan's correctional philosophy, discipline is compassion. By denying trade, they hope to erase manipulation. Still, hunger takes psychological forms. Former prisoners write about dreams of flavor: fried fish, curry rice, or cold beer. A man released from Osaka Detention Center told the Mainichi Shimbun, "The first taste of real food outside made me cry. I didn't miss freedom. I missed seasoning." Latin America, the food chain of fear in prisons across Brazil, El Salvador, and Mexico, meals reflect chaos more than order. At Brazil's Carandiru Penitentiary before its closure, inmates cooked for themselves in makeshift stoves using scrap metal and heated wires. Those who controlled food distribution, often gang-affiliated, held more influence than guards. In El Salvador's overcrowded Mariona prison, food is cooked in massive pots, stirred by inmates under supervision. Reports from Reuters and Human Rights Watch describe meals of rice, beans, and occasionally meat, but portions vary depending on who controls the cell block. An unconfirmed but persistent rumor says some gangs use food as punishment, denying portions to rivals to enforce discipline. Officials deny systemic abuse, but video leaks from inside have shown prisoners scraping leftovers off the floor. In these regions, family packages, bundles of food brought by loved ones, become lifelines. When gangs tax these deliveries, hunger becomes debt. Survival means belonging to someone stronger, even if it costs your dignity. Europe, rehabilitation or reality? Europe presents another picture, one of contrast and contradiction. In Norway's Halden prison, inmates cook in modern kitchens stocked with pans, oil, and spices. They prepare dinner in groups, supervised by staff, eating together at tables that resemble family settings. Food is therapy, one counselor told The Guardian. It teaches social behavior. Across the border in Poland, however, conditions are less forgiving. According to an Amnesty International report, some facilities still serve meals with minimal protein, mostly potatoes and soup. Inmates with special diets, diabetic, religious, or medical, often wait months for proper approval. It's better now than in the 90s, one former prisoner said, but it's still survival, not comfort. In France, food has become part of reform. The Fleury-Mérogis prison near Paris introduced inmate-run kitchens, where selected prisoners train as cooks for re-entry programs. They wear uniforms, use professional utensils, and earn small stipends. The government calls it culinary rehabilitation. A French journalist who visited described it as a rare glimpse of dignity in a system built on deprivation. The unwritten rule. In every prison, a quiet truth holds: whoever controls food controls order. Guards understand it, inmates live by it, and reformers fear it. A former corrections officer in Illinois explained it bluntly to the New York Times. If the chow hall runs smooth, the whole prison runs smooth. When food goes wrong, riots start. History supports that claim. The Attica Uprising in 1971, one of the most violent in U.S. history, began partly from complaints about rancid food and overcrowded kitchens. In Russia's 2005 Kapaysk protest, inmates shouted through windows about spoiled porridge and broken teeth. In Philippine jails, journalists have documented fights erupting over missing portions. Food is both the beginning and end of prison peace. By nightfall, trays return empty or half-finished. The kitchens quiet down. Steam fades from the pots, and the air smells of salt and metal. But inside every inmate's head, hunger continues, not always in the stomach, but in memory. The meal you can't choose. The taste you can't forget. And the control you can never take back. Hunger as resistance. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. For most people, hunger is an inconvenience. For prisoners, it's a form of rebellion. When every privilege, light, movement, time, is taken away, refusing food becomes the last language of control. Across the world, from California to Moscow to Tokyo, hunger has spoken louder than any shouted protest, louder even than riots. It begins with silence, a tray left untouched, a spoon not lifted. Then it spreads. United States. The strike at Pelican Bay in July 2013, more than 30,000 inmates across California's prisons refused their meals. It started in a single block. The Security Housing Unit of Pelican Bay State Prison, one of the most isolated places in America. Inmates confined for decades in small, windowless cells coordinated a peaceful rebellion that would become the largest hunger strike in U.S. history. Their demand was not gourmet food or extra rations. They wanted an end to indefinite solitary confinement, where men spent 22 to 23 hours a day alone, eating through a metal slot. Food was the only contact with the outside world, and now they would reject even that. According to court filings later cited in Ashker v. Governor of California, the strike lasted 59 days. Some participants lost over 30 pounds. Others collapsed from dehydration. The state downplayed the protest, calling the meals nutritionally adequate. But leaked letters, later verified by the Los Angeles Times, told a different story, of men coughing up bile, guards watching without emotion, and doctors warning of permanent organ failure. One prisoner wrote, "They can take my freedom, but not my decision to eat or starve." Eventually, the strike led to partial reform. In 2015, California agreed to end indefinite isolation and review thousands of solitary cases. The victory was bittersweet. Many organizers were later transferred to other facilities. But the hunger strike proved one thing: even food, designed to control, could become a weapon against the system itself. Russia, the silence of the colonies. In Russia's prison colonies, hunger strikes are rarely publicized, and even more rarely believed. Yet reports persist. Letters smuggled out, relatives whispering during visits, human rights monitors piecing together the story. According to Memorial Human Rights Center, a now-banned NGO, hunger protests in Russian prisons date back decade. One of the most notable erupted in IK-6 Melikovo, a penal colony east of Moscow, where inmates allegedly refused food to protest beatings and forced labor. The Russian Federal Penitentiary Service denied any strike, claiming all inmates are eating normally. But testimonies later gathered by Novaya Gazeta described a haunting scene: trays untouched, prisoners lying weak on bunks, guards threatening force feeding. In Russia, to refuse food is not a right, it's an act of defiance against the state itself. And defiance carries punishment. Former prisoners recall being dragged to the infirmary, their arms restrained, a rubber tube forced down their throat. The official term is medical intervention. The inmates call it punishment disguised as care. Still, they persist. One ex-inmate wrote anonymously in 2020, "I wasn't starving to die. I was starving to be seen." Japan, quiet obedience, silent protest. Japan's prison system is built on order, making open hunger strikes almost unthinkable. But even in this environment of silence and submission, resistance finds small cracks. In 2006, a series of internal reports from Japan's Ministry of Justice noted refusal of meals as a form of noncompliance in several facilities, including Fuchu and Osaka detention centers. The numbers were small, never more than a few dozen inmates, but the message was clear: even in a system of perfect order, humans resist control over their bodies. A former guard told Yomiuri Shimbun, "When a prisoner refuses food, the whole schedule collapses. It's chaos, but silent chaos. Authorities usually respond quickly: medical observation, isolation, and careful persuasion." Unlike in Russia or the U.S., force feeding in Japan is rare and heavily regulated. But the moral weight remains. In a society that prizes obedience, to reject one's meal is to reject one's place in the system. One released inmate recalled, "I didn't shout. I didn't fight. I just didn't eat. And for the first time, they noticed me." Middle East, the politics of starvation. In some of the world's most contested prisons, hunger strikes move beyond personal protest, they become political weapons. In Israeli detention centers, for example, Palestinian inmates have staged dozens of hunger strikes over administrative detention, imprisonment without trial. According to Haaretz and the BBC, some lasted over 60 days, monitored by the Red Cross and international observers. Medical records show severe weight loss, muscle atrophy, and heart failure risk. The Israeli prison service allows force feeding under court order, a policy criticized by Amnesty International as a violation of human rights. But to the prisoners, the strike is their last form of communication, a message to the world written in hunger. One letter smuggled from Ketsiat prison read, "We are disappearing slowly, not in silence but in starvation." These protests, though politically charged, reveal a universal truth. When no one listens to your words, your empty stomach becomes your voice. Europe, the ethics of force. In Ireland, the shadow of hunger strikes carries deep historical weight. The 1981 protests in Maze Prison, led by IRA members including Bobby Sands, became an international symbol of defiance. Sands starved for 66 days, dying on May 5, 1981. 9 others followed. According to court archives and medical reviews, The British government refused to intervene without consent. The result transformed the political landscape of Northern Ireland. In the years since, European prisons have adopted strict ethical guidelines. Inmates cannot be force-fed unless life is in immediate danger and consent is impossible to obtain. The European Court of Human Rights now treats such acts as potential violations under Article 3, inhuman or degrading treatment. Still, ethical lines blur. In 2014, British authorities approved temporary force-feeding orders for terrorism suspects on hunger strike, citing national security. Civil rights advocates called it a betrayal of medical ethics. Hunger strikes expose not only the cruelty of systems, but the fragility of the people who run them. When food becomes a weapon, hunger strikes rarely end in victory. Most end in exhaustion, negotiation, or death. But their symbolism remains unmatched, the idea that by rejecting food, a prisoner reclaims autonomy in a place designed to erase it. Inmates know the cost. Doctors warn them. Guards mock them. Fellow prisoners watch quietly, half admiring, half afraid. Because in prison, nothing is more dangerous than someone with nothing left to lose. In 2022, a human rights observer visiting AU's detention facility summarized it simply: you can chain a man's hands. You can lock his body. But you can't force him to swallow. The universal truth. Whether it's a plastic tray in Colorado, a tin bowl in Siberia, or a lacquered dish in Tokyo, food defines the relationship between power and personhood. To eat is to submit. To starve is to resist. The world's prisons differ in size, culture, and cruelty, but all share one unspoken rule: control the food and you control the soul. Yet within that control lies the smallest, fiercest form of rebellion: refusal. When the world forgets you exist, hunger reminds it that you do. Warning: this story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real event. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. All factual information is based on verified court records, investigative journalism, and credible human rights reports. Freedom tastes different. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real event. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. When a prisoner is released, they don't step back into freedom all at once. They feel it first through their taste bud. The first sip of real coffee. The first bite of bread that wasn't rationed, counted, or approved. For many, that moment of flavor carries the weight of years. The first meal. Across the United States, reentry programs often include what's called a first meal ritual. It's not official, it's something ex-prisoners create for themselves. Burgers, fried chicken, or homemade soup, simple things that smell like memory. A man released from Angola prison in Louisiana told the Marshall Project, "I didn't cry when they opened the gates. I cried when I tasted hot sauce again." For him, that bottle of spice wasn't food, it was identity. Years of bland meals had stripped him of culture, family, and even time. Every inmate learns that food is more than sustenance, it's the link between person and place. Another former inmate from San Quentin described sitting in a diner for hours, just to hold a fork that wasn't plastic. He said, "For the first time, I didn't need permission to chew." Ghosts of the menu. But even outside, prison meals linger. Nutritionists working with reentry centers in Texas and Florida have documented what they call institutional appetite, the tendency of released prisoners to eat as if they might still go hungry tomorrow. Large portions, little trust, constant scanning of leftovers. According to a 2019 study in the Journal of Correctional Healthcare, nearly 40% of formerly incarcerated people reported digestive or nutritional issues linked to years of poor diet inside. "Your body remembers," said one prison physician, "and so does your mind." Some ex-inmates avoid foods they were forced to eat: gray meat, powdered milk, or plain rice. Others crave them compulsively, as if tasting their own captivity. In Moscow, a former inmate told Medusa, "I eat soup every day. I hate it, but I can't stop. It's how I know I'm alive." In Japan, a man who served 8 years in Fuchu prison told NHK, "At home, I still fold my chopsticks after eating. I don't mean to. It's automatic." Prison doesn't just take years, it rewires ritual. Food as healing. Around the world, reformers are trying to turn that same ritual into recovery. In Norway, inmates who learned cooking inside now teach it to others in reentry programs, turning former punishment into livelihood. In Italy, a cooperative near Milan employs ex-inmates as bakers. Their slogan, "Bread that frees." In the United States, nonprofits like Cafe Momentum in Dallas train youth offenders in professional kitchens, showing them how food, once used to control them, can now empower them. Their founder, Chef Chad Hauser, told NPR, "We're rewriting what food means for these kids. It's no longer fear. It's creation." Even within prisons, quiet revolutions are happening. At San Quentin, inmates in culinary programs cook full meals for staff and visitors. One participant said, "For 2 hours, I wasn't an inmate. I was a chef." The flavor of dignity. When all the data, politics, and systems are stripped away, what remains is a simple truth: food tells the story of power. It always has. In free society, meals connect families. In prison, they divide them. But in both worlds, the act of eating, or refusing, defines identity. A psychologist who worked with long-term inmates once wrote, "The human need for dignity is stronger than the need for food. That's why every hunger strike, every smuggled seasoning packet, every shared spoonful of soup carries meaning far beyond its calories." The men and women who've lived through these systems don't describe food as good or bad. They describe it as remembered. Because to remember is to be free again, even for a moment. Epilogue: The table beyond bars. Picture a long metal table in a gray room. Now picture another, wood, sunlight, laughter, choice. Between them lies the distance between punishment and humanity. The first table is the one most of the world never sees. The second is the one we take for granted. Every prison meal tells us who we are as a civilization, what we value, and what we're willing to deny. The ingredients may differ: rice in Tokyo, bread in Moscow, beans in Texas. But the question remains the same: how do we feed those we choose to forget? Freedom, it turns out, doesn't start with open doors. It starts with the taste of something real, uncounted, unmeasured, and one's own. Warning: this story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real event. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. All factual content is based on verified reports, court filings, and credible journalism.